In the previous and first episode on LS swapping this 58 Cadillac, I got a lot of junk stripped out of the way and a lot of things figured out for mounting that LS engine in here. I am currently waiting on the oil pan. We ordered the oil pan. It should be here today or tomorrow, but while I'm waiting on that pan to get the engine mounted in the chassis, I can go ahead and finish off my brake and clutch setup in this thing and the firewall by getting the other bead rolled panel behind that booster. So let's start off with that, get some pedals wrapped up in this thing, and hopefully by then we have an oil pan to get that engine shoehorned in the chassis and bolted in. So with the bead rolled panel mounted on the firewall, I went ahead and marked out all the holes for the clutch and brake systems here. And as you can see above the body line, two of my bolt holes are actually up higher, not where the bead roll section is. Where this is, that's about an 1/8 inch step down, or out, I should say, off the firewall. So in the previous video, I actually cut two of these. There's one of these inside the car, which you guys just saw. I used it to mark the holes. This is a second one, and basically what I'm going to do is line this up with the holes I just marked from the inside of the car and trim this off so it fits nicely inside this bead rolled section. That way when I crank everything tight, it doesn't smash that nice step out on the 45-degree bead roll here. So basically I got to make a mark here where this is so I know where to cut this piece off. So I'm going to do that real quick with a pencil, and this side, the bottom is actually a little bit short, and this side should fit. So I'll mark this up, get it trimmed off, get it plug welded in here, and then drill through these holes and drill the additional holes up here where it's out of the step roll. And then technically I should be able to bolt this back on the firewall and everything should line right up. So I've got both the brake and clutch pedals installed to the firewall right now. One thing to take note of up here is I have to clearance the brake pedal bracket just a little bit for the cable here for the windshield wipers. So I'm going to put a little notch on the top side of that. Also, for mounting purposes on both the brake and clutch, I'm going to add an angle iron bracket or a tab for now off the passenger side of each pedal, on this side of each pedal. That way when I put them back in for the final time, I can weld up some bracketry off this original dash structure stuff here and attach it to the angle iron, which I will bolt to these brackets, and then you can always still get the assemblies out by unbolting them off that angle iron tab. But for right now, I'm gonna start out with doing a little clutch pedal adjustment. As you can see, that's not quite gonna work. I adjusted the last pedal cold actually last time by beating the brake pedal on the anvil and getting it to clear the column. It actually kind of looked like the brake where it was swooped way over towards the passenger side. Well, I straightened that one out. Obviously the pedal needs a little adjustment. The final adjustment on the bottom side I can do with the torch in the car by heating it and bending it to exactly level and get the pedals to look right once everything's hard mounted. I didn't want to heat it up high when I adjusted it before, and the same thing on the clutch pedal. I'm not going to heat it because they got all kinds of plastic junk in these pedals. There's a little tab right here, right there, as you can see on that spring-loaded doohickey on the clutch pedal. Well, I don't want to throw heat to it, so I'm going to go ahead, try to move that pedal over about 4 inches to the center line, and that'll be roughly close. I'll come back, test fit it one more time, and if that looks good, well, I'm gonna pull everything out, clearance, and make those brackets for the top, pull all the plates off the firewall, seam seal that plate on the firewall, the bead rolled panel, get everything bolted in for final, and probably throw some paint in between where everything's rusty between those plates on the original firewall. So that's the plan. Well, that might work. Well, that was surprisingly easy to bend that clutch pedal over in the vise like that. You're going to notice that it dropped significantly. It was way over here. This was, you know, bent over, as you saw, behind the brake pedal, but it was at the same height as the brake pedal before. Now that it's over here, obviously we dropped about 3 inches because I straightened this bar out, straightened it out vertically because it had that big angle. So I am going to have to shorten that clutch pedal a little bit and put the pedal back up pretty much to where the height of the brake is, because that's where it was. By doing that, I'm not really changing any leverages. If anything, I changed it right now, or I did. By bending that straight, I actually moved the pedal down 3 inches, so it would be a longer stroke on the clutch, a little bit easier to push. Once I move that back up to the same height as the brake, it's going to be pretty much identical to what the factory Camaro was, for leverage reasons anyway. So I'm going to leave these both like this, pop them back out, finish clearancing the rest of the stuff, get everything bolted in for one final time, and then I'll take care of adjusting the height on the pedals and do the fine tuning after everything else is mounted. Brake and clutch are bolted off to the firewall, and I'm ready to start fabricating my brackets from these angle irons down to the dash structure. But before I start cutting, welding, and grinding up there, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the back seat out of this thing. Get all this stuff out of here, pull the back seat, just to eliminate the chance of potentially lighting the back seat up. Get that out of here. I also have some insulation to remove over there on the passenger side firewall yet, and I was also asked to remove the stereo out of this thing. The customer is going to install his own stereo one day, and he asked me if I could just get this out of here. So I'm going to take care of that right away too, because there's actually a glass tube on it right here. And before I start welding 10 inches from it, I figured I'd get that out of the way, just so I don't inadvertently spatter up that tube or break it with sparks from the welder or the grinder. So let me strip a few more things out of here, get back to it, mount these up, get those pedals into shape down low, probably install the throttle pedal right away, and then we can move on to putting the oil pan on the engine, because I do have that now. Good enough. Pedals are in. Got the clutch and the brake both bent and twisted and trimmed up to be the exact same height. Those turned out great down there. Up in the top behind the dash, I added some plates off to my angle iron, and basically the brake has a big plate going over to the original dash support structure, and the clutch pedal's kind of the same too, welded off down here to the structure and up there with that other plate. That's going to provide plenty of support for those pedals once they start getting pushed with actual pressure on the hydraulics. So basically I'm probably going to pull the clutch pedal out one more time to finish off my welding, where I shortened that thing up. I think I took about 1 3/4 inches out of that pedal to get them at the same height, and then it will be a lot easier with the pedal out to do the finish grinding on that, make it look a little bit better. So at this point I'm going to call the pedals a success here and go ahead and get over to that engine, start putting the oil pan on, and we'll get this thing up on the hoist, pull the original transmission cross member out, and slide that thing in and start making some mounts. So we wrapped up last night. Me and Brian set the engine down in the engine bay here. And the oil pan, well, that's gonna work great. I have plenty of clearance now to the drag link. I'm about 3/4 of an inch away from it, and I still have to move the engine back about 1.5 inches yet. Unfortunately, the transmission is up against the floorboards right now, which is kind of hard to see, but I am basically bottomed out to the floor pan, so it is time to cut that original tunnel out of the car and then move the engine back, get it in place, and start making some mounts. Unfortunately, also the other problem I ran into was the cherry picker, or the engine hoist, was bottomed out up against the front bumper, and I pretty much had to push that engine back to get it where it sits now. So I needed a little bit more length on the engine hoist, which I came in this morning and made this right here, which is still hot because I just finished welding it up. Basically, this is a 12-inch extension. I made this to basically get that engine back a few more inches and be able to support it properly without bottoming out the jack on the engine hoist to the bumper. Now, that's not something I probably would suggest using to pull the whole engine and trans up out of here, because at this point, the pick point is actually in front of the lower wheels, and I wouldn't want to risk flipping that thing over forwards. I did that once in my life, and it wasn't fun. But basically, I can put this on after something's in the engine bay, such as this, perfect example. Put that extension on just to get a few more inches while mocking up motor mounts and stuff like that. So I whipped that up. I'm gonna go ahead and bolt this thing together, and we'll jump inside the car and get some floor pans cut out. Try to get this thing mounted up today and wrapped up. Let's go. Much better. So here's the deal. I've been doing some measuring and mock-up and trying to get some ideas on how I want to mount this engine here. Basically, the transmission is going to have to be really high in it. which is going to be a little bit of a problem. I'll show you guys that in a second. But here's the deal. Right now where my motor mount sits, I'm a little bit lower there than where the factory Cadillac mount was mounted. That was mounted on this flat right here. I want to mount this off this flat. So basically what I'm going to do is make a pipe to go between my mount, put a couple of stanchions on it, make a plate, and the plate will come up forward onto where the original Cadillac mount was, and I'm going to weld that off there. I'm going to have to go higher, obviously. Right now I'm a little low because the engine hoist sags, so if I go up about like this, looks pretty good like that. That gives me room, some clearance for my plate and my mounting bracket that I have to make yet for that. It also provides me with enough clearance for this header, because when that engine sits down low, if I go any lower than, you know, probably flush with this original mounting location, my header actually hits on the rag joint on the steering. So mounting it high is going to be the answer. And as you can see right now, that's about where I want, yeah, about right there. That's about height of where I want this thing mounted. I'm really angled back far right now, super back. Transmission obviously has to go up, which is a problem on an X-frame. Now ideally, it would be awesome if I could get that engine down in a position where the output on the transmission is centered with, get you guys down here, with the hole in the X-frame. So I could shoot the drive shaft straight in there and basically go out to a center support bearing at the back side of the X-frame. But that's not going to happen. It's just, it's not going to work that way. I'd have to get different headers. I'd have to do a bit of clearancing and make some weird mounts and get everything low up there. I'm better off to mount the thing high. And unfortunately, with this style of output here on the transmission, you really can't get any angle out of that. The drive shaft would have to come straight off of this. However, we got this already. This is going to replace the rubber joint on the back of the transmission. By putting this on, I'll be able to put a U-joint in it, which will allow the first section of drive shaft to be angled down in through that X-frame. Now, I probably, once I bring this thing up an inch, inch and a half to where the angle of the engine looks good up there and mount it, I probably am going to be, you know, I'm going to be an inch and a half up or whatever. I'm probably going to be running into that X-frame, at least for the front, I don't know, 8 inches. I'll probably have to cut the floor out here, split the X, and bring up that center section where it goes into the X part of it, just for drive shaft angle clearance to come off the trans down through. And then at the back of that, I will have a center support bearing. The drive shaft won't ever have to move up there, but I'm probably going to have to just split it at the front to get that to come down through and clear everything. Not a big deal. That's actually fairly easy. That's a lot better than butchering up the front cross member, getting different headers and all that stuff to make things fit up there. So up is the answer. I'm going to go ahead and start making some motor mount plates or brackets for the front. See if we can get this thing bolted in today. All right guys, so I left off, for me, about 3 weeks, a month ago, lowering this thing off the hoist after welding those gusset plates to the motor mounts in the Cadillac here. I said I was gonna move on and do the transmission or the tunnel over that transmission in the car. And in the last 3 or 4 weeks, since I left off, it's dark in there. We're not even gonna bother looking. But in the last couple weeks, we ordered some more parts. I've got seats now. I've got a vintage air kit for this thing. I've got a new shifter and a bunch of other stuff that I'm just gonna hold off on that tunnel for a future video. One other thing I was thinking about is the drive shaft, and I'm actually gonna do something totally different with the drive shaft, so I can't really do the tunnel yet anyway. I'm gonna modify that X-frame for a single piece drive shaft with a slider in it to go from the transmission to the rear end. The other thing is, this thing's getting lowered. I've got some lowering springs for the front and the rear. I've also got, I believe, all new bushings, but all new ball joints and suspension parts for the front of this, as well as those lowering springs for the front. I'm not sure exactly what lowering springs he ordered. He did tell them what engine is going to be in this thing, and they sent springs that are supposed to level this thing out with the LS engine weight in the thing. So they're kind of set up for a lighter engine than the Cadillac stuff. So I'm gonna cut this one off here. Next video is basically gonna be lowering this Cadillac, doing all the suspension work on it. I wanna get the thing sitting level. I wanna know where the pinion is going to be off the rear differential at ride height in this, so I can make sure that that X-frame gets modified in a way where a single piece drive shaft with a slider actually fits and I don't have any clearance issues in the future. So yeah, we got a lot done in this video. Got all the clutch and brake pedal stuff finished off, got the firewall finished off, engine is mounted, transmission cross member, headers fit, everything's good to go. So that's gonna be it for this one, guys. We're gonna come back with lowering this thing and doing some suspension work on it. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Till next time.